everyone, how's it going? I'm Casey Martin from Wine Country Woodworks, and this is going to be a video on how I process burl for resin casting and or stabilizing. Most of the pieces I resin cast are stabilized, so it's kind of the same thing. First and foremost, I don't have any footage, I wish I did, of me pressure washing the bark off of this burl. That's probably one of the things that most people are curious about, on how do I get the bark off of the burl so I can see the really cool live edge, you know, with all the spikes and the curves and everything that everybody loves about live edge burl. So I will have a link in the video description of the two pressure washers I used. One that I bought for myself, which worked for black ash burl, and the type of burl that I'll be showing myself cut with a chainsaw and all of the rest of the process. However, it took a really long time. For one of the big chunks that I'll show you guys, it took me about 2 hours with the 110 pressure washer that I used, whereas the more expensive gas power one that my dad has, it took me about 5 to 10 minutes per large chunk, because it's just like 2 or 3 times more as powerful. However, that doesn't mean that it won't work. So to use a lower pressure one, and depending on what type of wood you're using, the lower pressure one might be fine. And also, this wood had dried more than it should have, whereas an interesting thing to note, that when the wood is more wet, the bark is actually easier to come off. So keep that in mind for pressure washing. And like I said, I don't have any footage of that, but it's really straightforward. You want to use the lowest angle, which is basically the 0 degree, which is the red nozzle on almost any pressure washer, and it's pretty straightforward. So getting into the actual process, enough of me kind of talking. We're going to chainsaw it and then cut it on the bandsaw, and I'll kind of walk you guys through the process. It's a pretty straightforward one, but I was hoping this would be a helpful video for anybody who may have some wood on their property they were thinking of using, or a friend that has some, or whatever the case may be, but not really sure where to start. So let's get right into it. So the burl I'm going to be cutting up today in this video is about 90% of this burl, which is bay tree burl or laurel tree burl. I got it from a property my dad is doing some work on, and I'm really glad I saved it from the chipper. When he sent me a photo, I was like, oh wow, that's all burl. Can I keep it? And he said, of course. So I also have this little small piece you'll see here, and I have a few more of them that has some pretty cool compression curly figure from a tree that my fiance's dad was taking down as well. So the first plan of how I wanted to process this was to cut it all into pieces that could go on my bandsaw. I got this really nice 16-inch electric chainsaw off of Amazon. I'll leave a link in the video description, but it was like $60. I was blown away, honestly, because it's sufficiently powerful for its size, in my opinion. It does a great job. It was perfect for what I needed, and of course you obviously need to be able to be within reach of power, but if you are, like I was in this case, and I will pretty much every time I'll need to, because this is probably what I'll ever use it for, it works great. So my bandsaw height capacity for cutting is 6.5 inches. So most of these pieces, that's what I was trying to keep them. As some of them I knew I might just kind of leave out and not do anything with, maybe try to force spalt them by just literally leaving them out on the ground in some shade. But all the other pieces that I knew would have nice live edge, I was trying to keep under that 6.5 inches. It was a really hot day that day, about 90 degrees, so halfway through I always put them in the shade, but halfway through I swept up some of the chips before they would completely dry out and put them over it to keep them wet so that the sun didn't already start making them crack. So the size that I cut all of these to was a little over 2.5 inches. 2.5 inches is what I make most of my blocks from, and it's also what the non-live edge pieces of wood can easily be cut into scales from as well, or blocks on their own. So I cut them wider because, as most people would figure, they're probably going to warp and twist and all of that while they're drying, so I wanted some wiggle room. As you guys saw right there, me checking the blade, it started to build up some of the wet sawdust. The sawdust is wet as soon as it comes off, but then it dries instantly on the blade, and that can cause a little buildup, and it's not a problem. It comes right off when you give it enough pressure, but it can be kind of annoying at the beginning, because it will make like a noise, you know, because it'll mess with your guides a little bit, but it's not a problem. It doesn't really hurt anything. So cutting all of these guys, like I mentioned, to 2.5 inches. Some of them I could have cut into shorter pieces, but I'm figuring I'll do that later after they dry more. But as you can see, some of this stuff is beautiful. I mean, all of the pieces with that really live edge, kind of spiky part of the burl is beautiful. That stuff I think is going to look really cool too, because it has that compression curly figure. And granted, all of this stuff is going to look way better when it's dry. Right now, when it's really wet, it's hard to see the grain patterns. It's hard to see really what it's going to look like. And I have force dried a couple pieces of this that I'll mention later on in the video. And they end up kind of becoming like a golden brown color, and they look really pretty. So my plan for trying to dry this as efficiently as possible was to put them in my basement, where the temperature is pretty low. It's about 63, 64 degrees constantly, which was important for me because the shop ranges a lot in temperature. And I put as many as I could in a large cardboard box with the shavings to try to slow down the drying process immediately. And the pieces that I was mentioning that were really big had okay figure. I left them outside to see if they'll spalt. And there's the kind of temperature. The humidity is kind of high at 68%, but that's okay for me right now because I am going to end up anchor sealing these later on in a couple days. And as you can see right there, after putting in the moisture meter, it is wet. It is seeping out water. Some of the outside pieces that were on the outside pieces of the chunk that had been sitting there for about 6 months were already a little more dry, so maybe I'll be able to cut some of those into something soon. But I wanted to test what I could do with these for drying them for a few hours, so I put them at 216 degrees for about 3 or 4 hours, and they started to check or crack a little bit, and I figured that would happen, but it actually worked okay. This guy was really wet, only probably went down like 5 or 6%. It was probably at like 55. This guy went down significantly actually, because it was at 50% as well, and it definitely did check a little bit around the eyes, but you can start to see the figure and how nice it's going to look. And that guy, the other one, still 50%, but that one went down to 38%. So I might mess around with that a little bit more, but I hope you guys enjoyed seeing the process that I tried for this burl. Alright everyone, well that was a lot of work. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing it all sped up. It's always kind of satisfying in my opinion. But let me know if you guys have any questions. Always comment down below if you have any. That way when I answer them, anybody else who might have the same question can see it there. It overall is a pretty straightforward process. I'm really hoping that storing the pieces in the basement, even the pieces that aren't with the shavings, are going to be okay. I think they will be. I mean, I've done that with some pretty wet maple burl caps that I've got, and I kept them in my shop. And once they were cut up pretty small, not only did they dry pretty quick, like in a few months, opposed to like a year or two, and they didn't really check that much. Maple doesn't check that much to begin with, at least in my experience. This wood might. I haven't really had too much experience with it. I had a couple larger pieces in the past that I cut down to size and then sped up in the oven to just try to stabilize it, you know, get it to 0%. I didn't care how much it checked, just so I could cast a piece just for fun and to show my dad, since that's who it came from. And it checked pretty bad, but then again, that's going from like 30% moisture to 0 in a matter of like 24 to 36 hours. So I think this should be fine. Knock on wood. We'll see how it goes. I'll definitely keep you guys updated in future shop episodes and things like that, but I am pretty hopeful. I cut it thicker than I normally would. I probably mentioned that already, but that even if it warps, which I'm sure it will, it won't be really a problem. So anyway, enough rambling from me. Let me know if you guys liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel and want to subscribe to see more videos, definitely hit that subscribe button. And even if you are subscribed and want to make sure you're notified of videos whenever I make them live, make sure to hit that little bell notification next to the subscribe button as well, and that'll notify you. Anyway, thanks so much guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.